Death usually arrives swiftly and coldly, but in 1919, in Boston, the Grim Reaper arrived in a completely different form. It was warm, it was golden brown, and it tasted sweet. Imagine being chased by a wave, but it isn't water. It is 12,000 tons of molasses moving faster than an Olympic athlete. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But this is a true tragedy. A tragedy so soft, it might just put you to sleep right now. 99 sticky details about the Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919.
Welcome to Weird History of Sleep.
Welcome to Weird History of Sleep. This is the place where we rummage through the dusty drawers of the past, finding the strangest stories and using them to lull you to sleep. Do not try to memorize. Do not try to analyze. Your only task now is simply to listen and let go. Find your most comfortable position. Take a deep breath in and exhale gently. Let your body sink into the mattress. Today we are traveling back in time to the year 1919 in Boston. We will count 99 sticky details about the Great Molasses Flood, a real event, but one that sounds like a sleepy fairy tale. Now, close your eyes and let us begin the count. Number 1. The event occurred on January 15th, 1919. It was a midwinter day in Boston, yet the weather was incredibly strange. Usually January in Boston is bone-chillingly cold, covered in white snow. But on that day the temperature suddenly rose. It wasn't cold, it was warm, like spring knocking on the wrong door. This unusual warmth was the first key to unlocking the disaster. Number 2. The temperature climbed from below freezing to over 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius, in just one night. This sudden thermal shift caused the steel shell of the giant tank to expand. Imagine metal shrinking from the cold, then suddenly being forced to stretch from the heat. It was like the heavy sigh of a tired iron monster. Number 3. This molasses tank was a true giant. It stood 50 feet high, 15 meters. To visualize this, it was as tall as a 4- or 5-story building of that era. When you stood at its base and looked up, it blocked out the sky. A curving wall made of steel, cold and dark. Number 4. The diameter of the tank was 90 feet, 27 meters. It was so wide you could comfortably build a house inside it. It stood looming at 529 Commercial Street, right in Boston's North End. An iron beast sleeping amidst a crowded residential area, waiting for the moment to wake up. Number 5. The tank belonged to the Purity Distilling Company, a name that sounds pure, purity, but what they held inside was crude molasses, a thick black raw material used to distill industrial alcohol and rum. This company was a subsidiary of the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, a major power at the time. Number 6. At the moment of the disaster, the tank was full. It held approximately 2.3 million gallons of molasses. That number is too big to visualize. Imagine 3 million large soda bottles, all poured into one giant cup. The weight of that liquid mass was unimaginable, pressing against every thin steel plate. Number 7. The weight of that molasses was about 12,000 tons. 12,000 tons, equivalent to the weight of over 2,000 adult African elephants. All those elephants crowding together, pushing hard against the tank walls, wanting to get out. A silent but terrifying pressure. Number 8. Molasses is not like water. It is about 40% denser than water. This means when it moves, it carries much greater kinetic energy. It doesn't splash over you like ocean water. It hits you like a heavyweight boxer's punch wrapped in sticky velvet. Number 9. The tank had been leaking long before it burst. Locals recounted that the tank frequently wept drops of brown honey. The seams were not tight, and molasses oozed out, running down the sides of the tank like the sweet sweat of a giant working too hard. Number 10. The tank had been repainted to hide the leaks. Instead of repairing the cracks, the company painted the tank a brownish red. The purpose was to blend the color of the leaking molasses with the paint, so people wouldn't notice it was failing. A clumsy camouflage effort for a countdown to disaster. Number 11. Children in the North End often went to lick the leaking molasses. Picture children in worn-out coats, holding small sticks, sneaking up to the foot of the giant tank to swipe a bit of sweet syrup oozing from the gaps. It was a free treat, a rare bit of sweetness in a hard life, but it came from a ticking time bomb. Number 12. The tank made strange noises. People living nearby and employees working there occasionally heard groans coming from the belly of the tank. It was the sound of metal grinding against metal, the sound of pressure seeking an exit, like a monster mumbling in its sleep, signaling that it was about to wake up. Number 13. At exactly 12:40 p.m., the disaster began. It was lunch hour. People were eating, resting. The atmosphere was relatively peaceful. And then a sound tore through the air. Not the boom of a bomb, but the tearing of metal, like the sound of a machine gun firing rapidly as the rivets popped. Number 14. Witnesses described the sound as the roar of a beast. The ground shook. Some thought it was an earthquake. Others thought a train on the nearby elevated railway had derailed. But no, it was the scream of the giant tank as it finally surrendered the weight of 12,000 tons of sweetness. Number 15. The wave of molasses was 25 feet high, 7.5 meters. When the tank burst, the liquid didn't flow out slowly. It stood up into a dark brown wall as high as a 2-story house. It blocked out the midday sun, crashing down onto the streets of Boston like a surreal nightmare. Number 16. The speed of the flow reached 35 miles per hour, 56 km/h. You could not outrun it, even if you saw it from a distance. Its stickiness and speed were faster than the stride of any track athlete. It rushed forward as fast as a car driving in the city, sweeping away everything in its path. Number 17. The force of the molasses wave was strong enough to knock over buildings. It lifted the nearby Engine 31 firehouse right off its foundation. The building was pushed and slid, tilting like a paper toy blown by the wind. The firefighters inside, men used to facing fire, were now trapped in a deadly, sweet flood. Number 18. A section of the elevated railway was bent. The tracks of the Atlantic Avenue elevated line were hit by the molasses wave. The steel rails were twisted, and an approaching train was lucky enough to brake just before plunging into the sticky abyss below. The conductor saw the brown wall and stopped just in time. Number 19. The smell of molasses filled the air immediately. The air no longer smelled of industrial smoke, but thick with the scent of burnt sugar, caramel, and the sourness of fermentation. A scent so sweet it was suffocating, clinging to the lungs of anyone who inhaled it. Number 20. Pasquale Iantosca, a 10-year-old boy, was one of the first victims. He was gathering firewood nearby. When the wave hit, it swept him away like a dry leaf. This fact reminds us that, although it sounds strange and somewhat humorous, this was a real tragedy, as sweetness sometimes carries cruelty. Number 21. A heavy-duty truck was tossed like a toy. When the wave hit, it struck a delivery truck parked nearby. The vehicle was lifted into the air, spun around, and thrown directly into Boston Harbor. The image of a heavy steel machine floating in the air reminds us of the supernatural power of this fluid. Number 22. About 20 horses were trapped instantly. Near the tank was a stable for a trucking company. The poor horses were submerged to their bellies, then their chests. They struggled, but the more they struggled, the more the molasses gripped their legs like thousands of invisible hands holding them down. Number 23. The molasses began to cool and thicken the moment it hit the air. Remember fact number 1, the air was warm. But as the hot molasses flowed out and met the winter wind, it began a process of surface crystallization. Its viscosity increased exponentially. From a flow like oil, it turned into a flexible jelly, locking everything inside it. Number 24. The depth of the flood in low-lying areas reached 3 feet, 1 meter. In the lower streets, the molasses didn't just pass through. It pooled into deadly sweet ponds. If you fell in, standing up was nearly impossible due to the stickiness and the weight pressing on your body. Number 25. The quicksand effect. Physicists later analyzed that the molasses acted more like quicksand than water. When a person tried to struggle to get out, the movement created a vacuum, pulling them deeper to the bottom. The more you panicked, the faster you were swallowed. Number 26. Mrs. Bridget Cloverty's house was crushed. Bridget, 65 years old, was in her home at 6 Cops Hill Terrace. The wave crashed in, completely collapsing the first floor of the house. The roof fell, crushing her. This was one of the most heartbreaking tragedies, happening in the blink of an eye. Number 27. Martin Cloverty woke up in the middle of the molasses. Martin, Bridget's son, was napping after a night shift. He woke up not in his bed, but floating on his wooden bed frame, bobbing in a dark brown river, surrounded by the debris of his own home. An afternoon nap turned into a bizarre reality. Number 28. The colors of the world changed completely. Within a radius of several blocks, all urban colors, the gray of asphalt, the red of brick, the white of snow, vanished. Everything was coated in a layer of amber-brown glaze, shiny under the sun, reflecting the blue sky in a distorted way. Number 29. Screams were muffled. When water floods, people can scream for help. But when molasses hit, it filled the mouths and throats of victims instantly. Cries for help became gurgling, choking sounds, buried within the layer of sticky liquid. Number 30. Sailors from the USS Nantucket were the first to respond. This training ship was docked nearby. The young naval cadets in their crisp white uniforms rushed to the scene. They waded into the black molasses to pull victims out. The white of hope was quickly stained black by the disaster. Number 31. Clothes were torn from bodies. The friction of the flowing molasses was so great, it stripped the clothes right off many victims. As the flow passed, it took fabrics with it, leaving people naked, covered in a layer of black sugar, shivering in the January cold. Number 32. It was impossible to swim in molasses. Some people tried to swim strokes as if in water, but the molasses was too thick. Their arms were held mid-motion. Every movement required 10 times the normal strength. Muscles quickly became exhausted after just a few seconds of hopeless struggling. Number 33. Fire Crew Engine 31 was trapped in their own station. After the building was pushed off its foundation, 3 firefighters were trapped on the first floor. The floor was filled with molasses. They had to climb onto tables, onto chairs, trying to keep their heads above the rising liquid while the house tilted, ready to collapse. Number 34. The telephone system was cut. The waves snapped utility poles and communication lines. The North End area was isolated from information in the first few minutes. No one outside knew exactly what monster was attacking the city, only that a terrifying silence had descended. Number 35. Rescuers had to wade through giant glue traps. Police and firefighters arriving at the scene realized that every step they took made a loud smacking sound. Their shoe soles stuck tight to the ground. Many lost their shoes, having to walk barefoot over broken glass and metal scraps hidden beneath the syrup. Number 36. Molasses seeped into the basements of shops. Grocery stores and eateries along Commercial Street had molasses flood their basements. It mixed with goods, food, and wine, forming a slurry smelling pungent and impossible to categorize. Number 37. George Lay, a firefighter, fought bravely but hopelessly. He was trapped under a beam, with molasses rising to his chest. His comrades tried to pull him out, but could not lift the heavy timber. He joked and encouraged his team until his final moments, when the molasses rose over his head, a sacrifice in silence. Number 38. The elevated train tracks became a horrific observation deck. Passengers on passing trains looked down and saw a surreal scene. Humans looking like chocolate statues moving in slow motion, trying to detach themselves from the pavement. Number 39. Sensations of hot and cold intertwined. The molasses was warm when it first flowed out, creating a burning sensation on the skin. But as it cooled rapidly, it locked body temperature in, causing hypothermia for victims faster than even cold water. Number 40. The Boston police chief initially thought it was a terrorist attack. 1919 was a politically sensitive time. Upon hearing of the explosion and destruction, the authorities' first thought was not an industrial accident, but a bombing by anarchists. No one suspected the weapon was sugar. Number 41. An eerie silence fell immediately after the roar. After the buildings collapsed and the screeching metal stopped, there was a moment of absolute silence. No birds singing, no car horns. Only the sound of gas bubbles popping softly on the surface of the giant molasses sheet. A sticky, heavy silence pressing on the hearing of the survivors. Number 42. The first rescuers could not distinguish people from objects. Everything was coated in an identical brown glaze, a rock, a log, or a person curled up. They all looked like unfinished chocolate sculptures. Rescuers had to feel around with their hands, wiping away the syrup to look for signs of life. Number 43. Fresh water was completely useless. When firefighters tried using fire hoses to spray fresh water on the mess, they learned a bitter chemistry lesson. Fresh water does not dissolve molasses effectively. It only dilutes the surface and makes the molasses slipperier, turning the streets into a giant, deadly skating rink. Number 44. Salt water was the only solution. Molasses reacts better to salt water. The fire department had to mobilize fire boats from Boston Harbor, pumping seawater directly into the city to wash away the sugar layer. Millions of gallons of seawater were poured in, creating a sweet, brackish mixture flowing into the sewers. Number 45. Boston Harbor turned brown for months. The washed-away molasses flowed straight into the sea. The coastal waters lost their deep ocean blue, turning into a murky brown like soup. Sailors said their ships passing through these waters left behind trails of dirty brown foam. Number 46. Molasses clung to shoes and moved across the city. Rescuers, curious onlookers, everyone stepped in molasses. When they returned home, they carried the mark with them. Molasses stuck to shoe soles, spread to sidewalks, onto subways, into carpets in the furthest neighborhoods of Boston. Number 47. Subway seats became sticky. For weeks afterward, Bostonians complained that when they sat on subway seats or park benches, their clothes stuck to the surface. Molasses had become a type of invisible glue, coating the entire public transit system. Number 48. Public telephone handles were also infected. Imagine picking up a receiver, and when you put it down, your hand is covered in sweet slime. People pass that stickiness from one phone booth to another, turning the whole city into a giant connected web of goo. Number 49. Hospitals turned into horror candy factories. When victims were brought to hospitals, nurses were stunned. They couldn't remove the patient's clothes because the fabric was fused to the skin. They had to use scissors to cut every piece of cloth and wash the bodies with warm salt water, like washing layers of glaze off a cake. Number 50. Many victims were forced to shave their heads. Molasses clung to hair and dried as hard as rock. No shampoo of that era could wash it out. The only way to remove it was to cut the hair off completely. The image of survivors with bald heads became a haunting symbol of the disaster. Number 51. The search for bodies lasted for 4 months. Not all victims were found immediately. The hardened molasses hid everything beneath it. It took weeks, even months, as the sugar layer was chipped away bit by bit for people to find the remaining bodies buried at the bottom of the Candy Lake. Number 52. The total death toll was 21 people, a number that sounds small compared to the scale of the disaster. But their deaths came in the strangest and most painful ways, drowning in air, suffocated by sweetness. Number 53. Over 150 people were injured. The injuries were mainly fractures from impact and respiratory issues from inhaling molasses into the lungs. Many later suffered severe pneumonia known as candy lung, an unofficial but haunting medical term of the time. Number 54. Flies began to attack Boston. When spring arrived and the weather warmed, the smell of leftover sugar in the city's cracks attracted billions of flies, ants, and bees. Boston not only faced the aftermath of the explosion, but also had to endure an insect plague coming to feast on the sweet ruins. Number 55. The cleanup required over 80,000 man-hours. Hundreds of workers worked day and night, using brooms, shovels, and hoses. They scraped every layer of sugar off the streets, off the walls. The work was as meticulous and exhausting as trying to clean a beach with a toothbrush. Number 56. Sand was spread everywhere to absorb the mess. To allow people to walk without getting their feet stuck, authorities spread tons of sand over the remaining molasses puddles. Boston at that time looked like a brown desert where sand and sugar mixed under pedestrians' feet. Number 57. The scent of burnt caramel lingered for decades. This is one of the most famous legends. Bostonians swear that even 30 or 40 years later, on hot summer days, the smell of molasses still rose from the cracks in the sidewalks of the North End, an olfactory ghost that refused to leave. Number 58. The lawsuit lasted 6 years. This was one of the longest civil lawsuits in Massachusetts history at the time. Over 3,000 witnesses were called. Lawyers argued about steel thickness, air temperature, and the molecular structure of molasses for thousands of hours, creating a mountain of files as dense as the molasses outside. Number 59. The company blamed anarchists. To evade responsibility, Purity Distilling insisted that someone had planted a bomb to sabotage the tank. They painted a conspiracy theory about a terrorist sneaking up the tank and dropping a bomb into the vent, but no evidence of explosives was ever found. Number 60. An ambulance had its wheels glued shut. During the rescue effort, a horse-drawn ambulance entered the edge of the flow. When it stopped to pick up a patient, its wheels sank and were gripped tight by the molasses. The horses couldn't pull the vehicle out, and eventually, the ambulance had to be left there until the cleanup was finished. Number 61. The man chiefly responsible was named Arthur Gell. Arthur Gell was not an engineer. He knew nothing about steel or pressure. He was the company treasurer. Imagine asking an accountant to design a hydroelectric dam. Arthur saw that tank not as a physical structure, but as a giant wallet to hold money. Number 62. No engineers or architects were hired for consultation. To save money, Gell supervised the construction himself based on sketchy drawings. No one calculated the material strength. That giant tank was built on faith and ignorance rather than mathematics and physics. Number 63. The construction process was rushed to the point of negligence. In 1915, the World War was ongoing, and the demand for industrial alcohol soared. The tank was erected at lightning speed in just a few months. They raced against time for profit, skipping every basic safety procedure. Number 64. The tank was never fully tested. Standard procedure was to fill the tank with water to check for leaks before use. But Gell said no. Water costs money and took time. He only filled it with a mere 6 inches, 15 centimeters of water to test the bottom. It was like testing the safety of a submarine by dropping it in a bathtub. Number 65. The steel walls of the tank were too thin. Investigators later discovered that the steel thickness was 50% less than required. For the tank's massive size, that steel shell was actually as fragile as an eggshell. It had been stretched to its breaking point from day one. Number 66. The steel lacked manganese, making it brittle. The type of steel used was identical to the steel on the Titanic. In the cold Boston winter temperature, this steel lost its ductility and became as brittle as glass. When subjected to sudden pressure, it didn't bend to absorb the force. It shattered. Number 67. The rivets were designed incorrectly. Thousands of rivets used to join the steel plates together were subjected to excessive shear force. When pressure increased, these rivets shot out like machine gun bullets. Witnesses described the sound of popping rivets sounding like bang, bang, bang just before the tank collapsed. Number 68. The zipper effect. When a small crack appeared and a few rivets popped, the entire structure collapsed in a chain reaction. The crack ran along the tank body as fast as unzipping a jacket, but in reverse. ripping the monster wide open. Number 69. Fermentation inside the tank created a gas bomb. Molasses is not inert. It ferments naturally and produces carbon dioxide, CO2 gas. Inside the sealed tank, gas pressure built up gradually over the years, pushing against the tank walls from the inside like an overinflated balloon. Number 70. A deadly temperature mix. The new shipment of molasses pumped into the tank just days before the disaster was warm, molasses heated to flow easily. When this warm stream met the cold old molasses in the tank, it created chaotic thermal and pressure currents. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, or rather, the drop that burst the tank. Number 71. Judge Hugh Ogden was appointed to investigate. He wasn't a standard court judge, but a special auditor. He dedicated 6 years of his life just listening to talk about molasses. He sat in a room, listening to thousands of hours of testimony, becoming a reluctant expert on viscosity and steel structures. Number 72. The case file was 25,000 pages long. If stacked, this pile of paper would be taller than the molasses tank itself. This is one of the most massive legal records in U.S. history, recording every screw, every crack, and every cry of grief in detail. Number 73. Wine 1500 exhibits were presented in court, from rusty steel shards, sugar-stained shoes, to crumbled concrete samples. The courtroom turned into a strange museum of the disaster, where every exhibit told a story of negligence. Number 74. Scientists became courtroom stars for the first time. Before this case, courts usually relied on eyewitnesses. But the Boston Molasses case changed everything. For the first time, metallurgical engineers, physics professors from MIT and Harvard were invited to explain natural laws. Modern forensic science was conceived from this pile of molasses. Number 75. The final conclusion. There was no bomb. After 6 years, Judge Ogden ruled Purity Distilling Company was fully responsible. No anarchists, no sabotage plot. Only structural weakness and human greed. Number 76. The compensation was $628,000. In 1925, this was a huge sum, equivalent to about $10 million today. Although it couldn't compensate for the loss of life, it was a heavy blow to the corporation's wallet, forcing them to admit their mistake. Number 77. Each family of a deceased victim received about $7,000. A bitter number. The value of a human life back then was converted to about $120,000 today. Despite winning the lawsuit, the family's pain remained, unable to be filled by money or sweetness. Number 78. U.S. building laws change forever. After this disaster, a regulation became mandatory. All major engineering drawings must have the signature and seal of a professional engineer and a licensed architect. You can sleep soundly in your house tonight, partly thanks to the lesson from this disaster. Number 79. The scrap metal from the tank was not thrown away. Steel was precious at the time. After cleanup, the twisted sugar-coated steel plates were sold, melted down, and recycled. Perhaps the spoon you use for breakfast, or your window frame, contains a few iron atoms from that deadly tank of yesteryear. Number 80. The tank's location is now a baseball park. The area is now Langone Park. Children run, play baseball, and skateboard right on the ground where 21 people were once submerged. Beneath the green grass, history lies dormant, sweet, and terrifying. Number 81. Modern scientists vindicated the witnesses. In 2016, a research team at Harvard University recreated the disaster model. They concluded that in the January cold, the molasses thickened rapidly, causing it to move like a mudslide rather than a liquid. The stories about being unable to run away were physically accurate. Number 82. Molasses was actually used to make explosives. We often think of molasses for baking or rum. But in 1919, the main purpose of this tank was to produce industrial ethanol, a key ingredient for making munitions and explosives. This sweetness inherently carried the seeds of war. Number 83. No photo captured the wave. All the images you see online are scenes of the wreckage after the event. No one could pull out a camera fast enough when the 25-foot brown wall crashed down. That wave exists eternally only in the memories of the departed and in our imagination. Number 84. A small and humble memorial plaque. If you go to Langone Park in Boston today, you will see a small green plaque planted at the entrance. It summarizes the event. Very easy to miss. A massive disaster now shrunk down to a small metal plate, sitting quietly under the shade of trees. Number 85. The Legend of Molasses Cellars. Many houses in the North End had basements flooded with molasses. Residents recount that, despite washing hundreds of times, the cellar walls still oozed a sticky resin whenever the weather was humid, as if the house had drunk its fill of molasses and was now sweating it out. Number 86. Boston had a scent map. After the event, locals drew an olfactory map of the city. The North End was marked as the Sweet Zone. That scent became an invisible geographic marker, dividing the boundary between safety and the disaster zone. Number 87. This event became a primer for engineering students. At almost all construction universities in the U.S., the Great Molasses Flood is a classic case study. It teaches future engineers that a small detail like steel thickness or ambient temperature can lead to catastrophic consequences. Number 88. Rats in Boston Harbor got unusually fat. In the months following the flood, the rat population in the harbor area exploded. They feasted on the leftover molasses in the sewer nooks and crannies. A tiny ecosystem was completely altered by this incident. Number 89. Bostonians have a dark joke. When someone does something too slowly, old Bostonians used to say, "You're slower than molasses in January." This idiom existed before, but after 1919, it took on a much more macabre and sarcastic meaning. Number 90. Sepia tone covers the memory. When remembering this event, people don't visualize it in vivid color. In the collective mind, it is always a reel of old yellow-brown film, the color of old photos, and the color of the molasses itself, a nostalgic and sad color. Number 91. This event ended the era of industrial cowboys. Before 1919, big companies in the U.S. operated very freely, building whatever they wanted. The bursting of this tank was the final period for that wildness. It opened the era of control, regulation, and workplace safety. Number 92. There is no grand anniversary ceremony. Unlike other disasters, people rarely hold large memorials for this event. Perhaps because it is too bizarre. It sits on the border between tragedy and dark comedy, leaving people confused about whether to cry or laugh. Number 93. The earth has healed itself. The land has a miraculous ability to recover. The sugar-soaked soil of the past has been replaced, green grass has grown. The trees in the current park draw nutrients from the earth. Perhaps there is still a bit of 1919 sweetness in their sap. Number 94. Sticky souls. Ghost stories about shadowy figures walking with difficulty, stuck to the ground at night, are occasionally told. But they are gentle ghosts, simply trying to get home after a hard shift over 100 years ago. Number 95. The Silence of Water. Right next to where the tank burst is Boston Harbor. Seawater laps against the embankment every day, washing away memories. Water always wins. Water dissolved the molasses, and time dissolved the pain. Number 96. Now the air is very fresh. Take a deep breath. No more smell of burnt sugar. No smell of rusting metal. Only the cool, clean air of the present, filling your lungs. Number 97. The weight is gone. Those 12,000 tons of molasses have drifted far away. Nothing weighs on your shoulders anymore. All work pressure, all worries of the day, let them flow away like molasses dissolving into the ocean. Number 98. You are in a safe place. Around you are sturdy walls, a soft bed. No tank is about to burst. No flood is coming. The world outside is sleeping peacefully. And so are you. Number 99. Everything will pass, no matter how slowly. Even the thickest molasses will eventually drain away. Even the longest day will eventually see the sun set. Gentle darkness is wrapping around you, sweet and soft, but not sticky. It is weightless. We have finished counting. 99 details about a sweet nightmare have receded into the past. Boston has long been asleep. The old streets have dimmed their lights. Now, let your mind drift. Imagine your body getting heavier, but it is the pleasant heaviness of relaxation. Like a drop of warm molasses, slowly melting, spreading peace to every finger and toe. Everything slows down. Very slow, very soft. This world still has many strange things, but tonight, the only thing that matters is your sleep. Good night,